Brighton absolutely on fire in the opening 2 games of the season. And yes, we're only 2 games in, but Brighton are top of the Premier League table. They've got maximum points and they've got a goal difference of 6 after 2 really impressive performances under Roberto De Zerbi. And as much as everybody praised Brighton under Graham Potter, they've gone to another level in the latter stages of last season. And it looks like they've carried that into this season.
Yeah, really found a way to score goals, because Graham Potter, that was always the issue. That their XG was expected goals was always incredibly high, and they never got anywhere near it. Whereas De Zerbi's gone in there and they just look, he's getting the best out of certain of the players. They look dangerous. Like all of a sudden now, Danny Welbeck looks like he's come from nowhere. Now he looks like he's back 25 years old again. But it's recruitment. Their recruitment is absolutely incredible. And even when Potter was there to now, they're getting the best out of these players. You're seeing the emergence of some superstars now, which is why all these top clubs come and take their players. And I think if I was a Brighton fan, my only worry would be if someone come and take the manager, because I think he's the most important part of that Brighton team.
Well, if they've got the recruitment right, then in theory, a manager should be able to come in. Just because you mentioned XG, and before I forget, there is a brilliant stat on the XG, which is quite a blunt tool, XG, isn't it? It tells you a little bit, but not an awful lot. But why it's interesting is because if you take penalties out of the equation, then Brighton have the highest XG of any team in the Premier League since Roberto De Zerbi took charge of them. So it just is an indicator of how attacking their football is. I'm not saying they're better at going forward than any of those other teams, but it just shows how much on the front foot they are and how many chances that they're creating from open play. It's a very specific way of playing, isn't it?
But you've got to take it from the back. It's not just their offensive players, what we're seeing with there's time and time again where the centre-backs know, and the goalkeeper, they know exactly where they should be, and it goes into midfield and it comes back out to the other. If there's a danger, they can be pressed, but even when they're pressed, they still play out. And it's a system within a system to get the players in midfield, to get those top players at the top of the pitch with a delivery that is actually going to be a benefit to them. Very rarely do they have to play a long ball, a ball over 40, 50 yards to hit the back to the front. It's all about build-up play. And they did that under Potter as well, but De Zerbi has taken it on to another level. And it's a system within a system. You think it's free-flowing, but it's not. Players have to be in actual positions when the ball, related to where the ball is at the back, and then they get through the pitch and the rest, and then their players up the top make your own decisions. Because you're talented, make your own decisions from that position. But they do it time and time again, and they create so much. If Harry Kane had gone to Brighton, which it would never have happened, where would you think Brighton could end up in the league? They could be the ones challenging Man City.
Yeah, because the build-up play with that finisher would just be incredible. But the other thing that you mentioned there as well was the recruitment at Brighton, and obviously it is a very specific type of player that they're looking for, and there is a very specific system under Roberto De Zerbi, and they have made a lot of money from selling on their players. And we've looked at a couple of them. Basuma getting plaudits from the opening games of the season. We're yet to see how it works for Moises Caicedo, but they're a bit hit and miss, some of the transfers. Cucurella doesn't play really at Chelsea. There are some players who've kind of disappeared. Trossard has been okay, but hasn't necessarily had a consistent run of games. So is there something about the way that De Zerbi sets up that allows these players to shine in his teams that maybe they wouldn't do elsewhere?
Well, he's not your typical Italian manager, because one thing that you always learn from Italian managers, whether it's a Carlo Ancelotti or a Max Allegri or famed ones, is that they teach football. Spalletti, especially at Napoli. And it's about making the right decisions. So they offer them 3 different types of decisions and which are the right ones to take. And it's about sort of hiring the IQ of the player to then play the kind of football that can be pragmatic or forward-thinking, no matter, or defensive, if you like. But with Gasperini of Atalanta, that you all remember, the type of coach who created the likes of Rasmus Højlund to be a star. And of course, De Zerbi, is that they're very attacking players, but they play in such a specific system. So, and that system is sometimes lulling players into a false sense of security, bringing them onto you and then releasing them to play through the pressure. When you teach them and they have so much instructions, and then you take them out of that system and ask them to then decide for themselves or know how to exploit space and move around the field on their own, it becomes that much more difficult, which is what you expect when these players then go on to a Manchester United or, say, Real Madrid or Juventus, and you're asked to make your own decisions. It becomes a lot more difficult. So in Italy, when he was at Sassuolo, a lot of players would be, a lot of teams were worried to buy any of his players. Would they perform as well without De Zerbi? And that was the question mark. For example, Scamacca, he went to West Ham. He created this monster that was so fun to watch at Sassuolo and in Italy. And then he moved to West Ham, and everyone considered him as not to be a very high-level player. Then you have Manuel Locatelli, another wonderful midfielder that was supposed to be even better than Sandro Tonali, went to Juventus, and we're still sort of waiting for him to really explode. And so that's what you get with somebody like De Zerbi. It's such an interesting style of football, but what happens when they leave that system?
It's almost like as well with their recruitment. They don't, because of the system and how effective it is, they don't have to go and sign the best players. They're not in the market as like for Chelsea's and Manchester City players. They can go and get a player that's of a certain level. Of course, they've got to be able to play in the Premier League, but fit their system perfectly. So again, their recruitment and the way that they do things down there. I know they've played Luton first game of the season and then they've played Wolves. I think if you'll play against Brighton, and even if you're 5%, 10% off what you should be, they can go and beat any team in the league 4-5, because that's just what they do.
We saw them do that to Liverpool at the end of last season.
They came to the Emirates,
well.
Arsenal. Came to Arsenal, Emirates. Arsenal were flooding people forward, and Brighton just went through them, ended up being 3-0.
Yeah, and they're able to do it. But it does come back to the point that you were making. We were saying, it's about the recruitment, but De Zerbi's influence there means that they can go out, like you say, and target exactly the player they need for exactly the position that he wants to fill. Do you think, in teams that you've played in, it's about the individuals in there, or do you think it's about the success of the system that they play?
Oh, see, I've always thought, certainly in the teams that I played in, it's always been about the individuals. I've never seen or worked with a manager where it's about the system of the team, because obviously the teams I played for, you were trying to just find the best players, and even if they probably don't suit, maybe it's their personality, their attitude doesn't potentially suit the dressing room, because they're very good, you bring them in. But with these, you never see any problems with the players that they recruit. They all know exactly what they're doing. I mean, I was with Brighton for a month on loan. I was with Solly March, and I would have never said in the space of, 10 years, he'd be where he is now. Because I thought to myself, he was a bit headless. His final delivery wasn't great. All of a sudden now, De Zerbi's gone in there, and he looks like he could be on the verge of an England call-up. He's been brilliant.
But what happens when they start playing in Europe, and they're playing every 3 days? And it's tough to manage all of that expectations, and then asking them to have this level of fitness as well to produce the kind of football in which they have to be so concentrated to manage it, because the players maybe aren't of the level of some of the other teams, your Manchester Cities, or what happens then? Is that the problem?
That's the problem. Not a problem. It's a nice problem that they've got, but that is going to be the obstacle, if you put it that way. The obstacle to overcome. Now, if I'm a manager, I'm opening the fixtures after a European game. I'm playing them. I'm hoping I'm playing them on the Saturday on the weekend after a European game, because this is going to be new to them. And the mentality and the physicality, they haven't got the squad like Chelsea or these top teams at the moment to cope with that. To ask those 13 or 14 players to do and play in Europe and then go at the weekend and play like we've seen them play, that is their test. It's a different type of test now. And they're not going to be able to rest people and bring people in that are going to give you the 8 and 9s out of 10. You're going to dip. So if I'm looking at the fixtures, I'm saying, I hope we're playing them on the weekend after they have a European game. So they've had a tough Premier League game, European game, and now you want to play them then on that weekend when they're going to be fatigued, or they're going to have to make changes. Injuries will come into it. They haven't quite got that squad. They've got a wonderful squad of, say, 14, 15. They haven't got that deep squad like Chelsea and other teams.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to watch them and see what they're capable of this season, as you say, with those extra fixtures on the cards for them. Talking of extra fixtures, tonight is the Ian Wright derby. It's Crystal Palace against Arsenal, and Wrighty himself will be back next week. But it could be an interesting one, particularly in terms of what Arsenal are going to do this season in terms of their title aspirations. You confident, Darren?
It was a tough place to go, but we saw Arsenal, I think it was the first game of last season, go there and beat them 2-0, played really well. And this is a different Arsenal squad, so it will be tough. But I expect Arsenal to go there and get 3 points. And
that's what Arsenal will be hoping for as well. Thank you to Mina, thank you to Glenn for coming in to join us. And we are looking forward to Wrighty coming back. It's always a pleasure, Darren. It's always a pleasure. And you can come back and see us even when Wrighty's here as well. And we'll be seeing more of Darren throughout the season.